ጸሓፉ ጉዳያት ወጻኢ ኣመሪካ ኣንቶኒ ብሊንከን ኣብ ምዝዛም ናይታ ኣብ ኢትዮጵያ ዝገብሮ ምብጻሕ ትማል ምሸት ኣብ ኣዲስ ኣበባ ኣብ ዝገበሮ ጋዜጣዊ ዋዕላም ምስ ቀዳማይ ሚኒስትር ኣብይ ኣሕመድን ነቲ ስምምዕ ሰላም ዝተፈራረሙ ወከልቲ መንግስቲ ኢትዮጵያን ሕወሓትን ተራኺቡ ደገፍ መንግስቲ ኣሜሪካ ንትግባረ ናይቲ ውዕል ሰላምን ውጽኢቱን ከም ዘረጋገጸሎም እንተኾነ ተሓታትነትን ዕርቅን ዘጠቓልል ኣሳታፍን ሰፊሕን መሰጋገር ፍትሒ ክትግበር ኣሜሪካ ከምትጠልብ ገሊጾም
It is great to be back in Africa, but also to make my first trip to Ethiopia as Secretary of State. I'm here in Ethiopia and then on to Niger to reaffirm a pledge that President Biden made at the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit late last year.
ብኣፍሪቃ ዝምርሑ ጻዕርታት ኣብ ብድሆታት መበል 21 ክፍለ ዘበን ውጽኢት የምጸለው ብምባል ነዚ ንናይ ኢትዮጵያ ምብጽሑ ዝምልከት ዛዕብኡ ዝጀመሮ ብሊንከን ነቲ ብኽልተ ሕዳር 2022 ኣብ መንጎ መንግስቲ ኢትዮጵያን መራሕቲ ትግራይ ዝተፈረመ ውዕል ሰላም ፕሪቶርያም ሓደ ካብቶም ጭቡጣት መርኣያታት መሪሕነት ኣፍሪቃ እዩ ብምባል ብኣብነት ጠቒስዎም
African-led solutions are increasingly making the difference on the challenges of the 21st century. One of the most powerful testaments to the importance of African leadership has been the November 2nd cessation of hostilities agreement and the conflict and suffering in northern Ethiopia.
ቀጢሉ እቲ ህይወት ኣማኢታ ሸሓት ዝተቐዝፈሉ ኩናት ኣዝዩ መዕነዊ ምንባሩ ብምዝኽኻር እቲ ዝተፈረመ ውዕል ምቁራት ተጻበውታት ህይወት ኣብ ምድሓንን ኣብ ምቕያርን ዓብዪ ዓወት ከም ዘመዝገበ ኣስሚሩሎም ድምፂ ተኽሲ ደው ኢሉ ግሰት ሰብኣዊ መሰላት ኣዝዩ ጎዲሉ ምህላው እውን ጠቒሶም ሰብኣዊ ረድኤት ናብቶም ዝግብኦም ተጸበይቲ ይበጽሕ ምህላው መሰረታዊ ኣገልግሎት እውን ኣብ ትግራይ ዳግም ጀሚሩ ከም ዘሎ ሰራዊት ትግራይ ዕጥቂ የውርድ ምህላው ካብ ፌደራላዊ ሰራዊት ወጻኢ ዝኾኑ ሰራዊት ኤርትራን ካልኦት ዕጡቋትን እውን ይወጹ ምህላዎም ኣገንዚቦም
The conflict was absolutely devastating. Hundreds of thousands killed. Widespread sexual violence against women. Millions forced to flee their homes. Many left in need of food, shelter, medicine. Hospitals, schools, businesses shelled, destroyed. The cessation of hostilities agreement is a major achievement and step forward. Saving lives, changing lives. The guns are silent. As the fighting has stopped, human rights violations have declined. Humanitarian assistance is flowing and finally reaching nearly all communities in need. Services are being restored in the Tigray region. The TPLF is disarming. Eritrean and other non-federal forces are departing.
እቲ በአፍሪካውያን ሸምገልቲም ሕብረት አፍሪካ ኬንያን ደቡብ አፍሪካን ብደገፍ አሜሪካ ዝተኻየደም ዕቱብ ዲፕሎማሲያዊ ጻዕሪም ነቲ ስምምዕ ሰላም ኣብ ምውሓስ ኣገዳሲ ተራ ከም ዝተጻወተም ብምምልካት ከኣም ስርዓተ ምክትታል ሕብረት አፍሪካ ንምሉእ ትግባር ናይቲ ውዕል ሰላም ቁልፊ ምዃኑ ኣዘኻኺሩ
The dedicated diplomacy of mediators from the African Union, from Kenya, from South Africa, supported by the United States, was essential to securing this agreement. And the AU monitoring mechanism is a key to its full implementation.
ኣስዒቡ ኣንቶኒ ብሊንከን ቀዳማይ ሚኒስትር ኣብይ ኣሕመድን ፌደራላዊ መንግስቲ ኢትዮጵያን መራሕቲ ትግራይን ነዚ ስምምዕ ሰላም ብምኽታሞም ዝኣተውዎ መብጻዕም ኣብ ምትግባር ዕቱብ ገስጋስ ይገብሩ ብምህላዎም ክምጎሱ ይግባእ ኢሎም እዞም ጻዕርታት እዚኣቶም ነቶም በቲ ኩናት ኣብ ትግራይ ኣምሓራን ዓፋርን ዝተጎድኡ ሕብረተሰባት ዳግም ኣብ ምህናፅ መሰረት ምዃኖም ዝገለጸ ብሊንከን ሓገዝ ደገፍን ከም ዘድልዮም ኣገንዚቦም እተን ግዳያት ዓመፅን ግፍዕን ዝኾና ደቂ ኣንስትዮን ኣብ ትግባረ ናይ ዝመስርሕ ሰላም ናይ ምውሳን እጃም ክህልወን ድማ ኣተሓሳሲቡ
Prime Minister Abiy and the Ethiopian federal government and Tigrayan regional leaders should be commended for reaching this agreement and for the significant progress in delivering on their commitments. These efforts have created the foundation to rebuild the communities that have suffered so in Tigray, Amhara, and the Afar regions. They need the help and support. I strongly urge the inclusion as well of women in decision-making roles as the agreement is implemented, especially in light of the gender-based violence that was perpetrated during the conflict.
ጸሓፊ ጉዳያት ወጻኢ ኣሜሪካ ኣንቶኒ ብሊንከን ኣብ ኣዲስ ኣበባ ዝገበሮ ጋዜጣዊ ዋዕላም ምስ ቀዳማይ ሚኒስትር አብይ አሕመድን ነቲ ስምምዕ ሰላም ዝተፈራረሙ ወከልቲ መንግስቲ ኢትዮጵያን ሕወሓትን ተራኺቡ ደገፍ መንግስቲ ኣሜሪካ ነቲ ውዕል ሰላምን ውጽኢቱን ከም ዘረጋገጸሎም ገሊጾም ውጽኢትን ረብሓን ናይቲ ሰላም ብምቁራጽ ኩናትን ተኹስን ጀሚሩ ኣዎንታዊ ዕድላት ክህነጸሉ ከም ዝግባእ እውን ኣገንዚቦም
Today, I first met with Prime Minister Abiy and then with signatories to the agreement, the heads of delegation of the government of Ethiopia and the TPLF, to underscore our support for peace, as well as the dividends it can yield. And those dividends are important. People need to see that peace brings concrete dividends in their lives. That starts, of course, with the cessation of violence, but we want to build positive things on top of that.
ቀፂሉ ክልቲኦም ወገናት ነቶም ኣብ ልዕሊ ህዝቢ ዝተፈጸሙ ገበናትን ዝኸተልዎ ሳዕቤናትን ኣፍልጦ መሓቦም ብኣዎንታ ከም ዝቕበሎ ብምጥቃስ ብግዴና ከም ሕቡራት መንግስታት ኣሜሪካ ኣብ ዝሓለፉ ዓሰርተታት ዓመታት ዝተፈጸሙ ነቲ ቀፂሉ ዝተኸስተ ግጭት ዘሰዓቦ ግሰት ሰብኣዊ መሰላትን ዓመፅን ጸቕጥን ንግንዘቦም ኢና ኢሎም ገበናት ከም ዝተፈጸሙ ብኩሎም ወገናት ተቐባልነት ምርካቡ ቀጻልነት ዘለዎ ዘላቂ ሰላም ኣምርግጋጽ ኣገዳሲ ጉምቲ ምዃኑ ብምምልካት ከዓ ኢትዮጵያውያን ዕርቅን ተሓታትነትን ዘጠቓልል ኣሳታፍን ሰፊሕን መሰጋገር ፍትሕን ምክያድ ዝኣተውዎ መብጽዓ ከተግብሩ ኣሜሪካ ከም እትጠልብ ኣገንዚቦም
We welcome the commitments that the parties have made to acknowledging the atrocities committed and their devastating consequences. For our part, the United States acknowledges the human rights violations and repression committed during the past 3 decades, actions which sowed the seeds of future conflict. We and others were insufficiently vocal about those abuses in the past. Recognizing the atrocities committed by all parties is an essential step to achieving a sustainable peace. We urge Ethiopians to follow through on their commitments to each other, to implement an inclusive and comprehensive transitional justice process that includes both reconciliation and accountability.
ነዚ ኣብ ሰሜን ኢትዮጵያ ኦሮሚያን ካልኦት ከባብታትን ሰዓሪሩ ዘሎም ዙርያ ፖለቲካውን ዓሌታውን ግጭታትን ምስባር መርዛም ጽልን ዓሌታዊ ፍልያትን ምስጋር እቲ እንኮ መንገዲ ምዃኑ ዘዘኻኸረ ብሊንከን ሕቡራት መንግስታት ኣሜሪካ ከም መሓዛ ናይ ዝጻዕሪ ቴክኒካውን ገንዘባውን ደገፋት ተቕርብ ምህላዋ ኣረድዮም ምህናት ዘላቕ ሰላም በቶም ንኢትዮጵያ ዝገጥምዋ ዘለዉ ብግጭት ደርቅን ሕፅረት መግብን ዝኣመሰሉ ቁጥዋ ብድሆታት ዝተሓላለኸ ጉዳይ ምዃኑ ከም ዘይከሓድ ብምምልካት ድማ ንኣብይ ኣሕመድ እውን ከም ዘረጋገጸሎም ኣሜሪካ ዝዓበየት ክልተኣዊ ሓጋዚት ኢትዮጵያ ከም ምዃና መጠን ካብ 2020 ዓመተ ምህረት ንድሓር ጥራይ $3 ቢልዮን ሰብኣዊ ረድኤት ከም ዝሃበት ኣዘኻኺሩ ንቐጻሊ ኣሜሪካ ኣብ ጎኒ ኢትዮጵያውያን ደው ከም እትብል እውን ኣረጋጊጾም ኣብዚ ናይ ሎሚ ምብጻሕ እኳን ህጹጽ መግብን ሰብኣዊ ሓገዝን እቶም ብግጭትን ደርቅን ዝተጠቕዑ ጽጉማት ኢትዮጵያውያን ዝውዕል $331 ሚልዮን ተወሳኺ ሓገዝ ክንገብር ምዃንና ገሊጽ ኣለኹ ኢሎም ኣብ ቁጠባውን ንግዳውን ምትሕግጋዝ እውን ሓበራዊ ምድግጋፍ ኣሜሪካን ኢትዮጵያን ከም ዝቕጽል ከዓ ኣረጋጊጾም ብኣጠቓላሊ ቀንዲ ተልእኾና ኣብ መንጎ ሕቡራት መንግስታት ኣሜሪካን ኢትዮጵያን ሓያል ምሕዝነታዊ ዝምድና ብምምዕባል ባህግታት ህዝብታትና ምምላእ እዩ ብምባል መግለጺኡ ብምምዛም ከዓ ካብ ጋዜጠኛታት ዝቐረበሉ ሕቶታት መሊሶም
Overcoming poisonous grievances and ethnic divisions is the only way to break the cycle of political and ethnic violence in the north, in Oromia, or anywhere else. As a partner in that effort, the United States is providing both technical and financial support. Building lasting peace is being made more complicated by the acute economic challenges that Ethiopia faces, resulting from the conflict, resulting from drought, resulting from food insecurity. As I conveyed to Prime Minister Abiy, the United States, as Ethiopia's largest bilateral donor, providing over $3 billion in humanitarian assistance since 2020, we will continue to be there for Ethiopians. We'll keep partnering on food security, and today I announced an additional $331 million in emergency food and humanitarian assistance that will reach millions of people, millions of Ethiopians affected by conflict, affected by drought. We'll keep working together on public health, building on our many years of partnership to combat HIV/AIDS and continue to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic and make sure that we're all prepared for future pandemics. We'll continue to support Ethiopia's economic development, investing hundreds of millions in health, economic growth, education, democracy, and food security every year. And we'll continue supporting migrants and refugees and victims of human rights abuse. In all that we're doing, our mission is to build a strong partnership between the United States and Ethiopia that ensures we can meet the aspirations of our people.
ፈለማ ካብ ጋዜጠኛታት ዝቐረበሉ ሕቶ ብዛዕባ ህላዊ ሰራዊት ኤርትራ ኣብ ዶባት ትግራይን ምልሻታት ኣምሓራን ፋኖን ካልኦት ዕጡቃትን ካብ ምዕራብ ትግራይ ዘይምውፅኦምን ግህሰት ሰብኣዊ መሰላትን ዓመፅ ደቂ ኣንስትዮን ምቕጻሉን እዚ ኩነታት ንትግባርን ኣይትውዕል ሰላም ከይዕንቅፎ ክሳብ ክንደይ ከም ዝሻቐል ኢትዮጵያ ተጠቃሚት ዕድል ንግዲ ኣገዋ ክትከውን ንግህሰት ሰብኣዊ መሰላት ብዝምልከት ክትገብሮ ዘለዋ እንታይ ምዃኑን ዝጠቅስ እዮም።
First, go to Daphne Saladakis with Reuters.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. There's been reports of continued atrocities since the November ceasefire. Eritrean troops still remain in border areas, and Fano Amhara militia still remain in western Tigray. Are you...
I got you.
Are you concerned that reported continued rapes and the presence of these troops could impede effective implementation of the deal? And what do you need to see from Ethiopia in terms of addressing accusations of atrocities during conflict to reinstate?
ብሊንከን ከምቲ ኣብ መግለፂኡ ዝጠቐሶ ተኽሲ ጸጢሉም ኣብ ትግባረ ትውዕል ሰላም እውን ጽቡቕ ገስጋስ ይርአ ከም ዘሎም ሰራዊት ኤርትራ ይኹን ካልኦት ዕጡቓት ናይ ምውፃእ ምንቅስቓስ ጀሚሮም ከም ዘለው እንተኾነ ፈጺሞም ካብ ትግራይ ከም ዘይወጹም እቲ ዕማም መስርሕ ምዃኑ እንተኾነ ኣሜሪካ እትውዕል ሙሉእ ብምሉእ ክትግበር ከም እትጽበ እዩ ዝጠቅስ ንግህሰት ሰብኣዊ መሰላት ብዝምልከት እቲ ጸገም ኣዝዩ ጎዲሉ ከም ዘሎም ካብ ሰራሕተኛታት ረድኤትን ናጻ ተዓዘብትን ሓበሬታ ከም ዘለዎ ይሕብር።
Thank you very much. As I said, what we've seen since the agreement was reached in November has been very significant progress along all the necessary lines of effort and necessary commitments. And by and large, the guns are silent. Humanitarian assistance is flowing. Services are being restored. We've seen the TPLF disarm its heavy weapons. And we are seeing external forces moving out of Tigray to include the Eritreans. It's not complete. It's a process, but we continue to see significant movement in the right direction to fulfilling the commitments that were made in the agreement. As to human rights concerns and abuses, I just had an opportunity to meet with human rights advocates and experts a short while ago here in Addis. And these are people who are themselves present or their organizations are present in Tigray, and this includes the United Nations. And what they reported to me is a very significant drop in human rights violations and abuses in Tigray. We've also heard that from other sources. That doesn't mean that they have been eliminated, and indeed, we strongly urge all parties to the conflict to do everything possible to ensure that they cease entirely. But again, we've seen what was described to me by independent experts as a very significant diminution in human rights violations. With regard to our own engagement and assistance, as the work continues, as this process of implementing the agreement continues, to include making sure that there are no ongoing gross violations of human rights, to include making sure that the transitional justice process is stood up and moving forward in an inclusive and credible way, then our own ability to continue to move forward on our engagement with Ethiopia, to include economic engagement, will also move forward.